Hey everyone, welcome to our Why Wessuc webinar on vacuum services today. Today is our 5th webinar, I believe. We started doing these just under a year ago. We've had a lot of great feedback, some constructive criticism as well. So we're really happy that they're working. And on that note, after today's presentation is finished, a survey will automatically pop up. So if you've got maybe 2 extra minutes on your hands, we do take that feedback seriously. In fact, some of the changes we've made with our webinar, if you've joined us previously, are because of survey results. So we do listen to them and we do take them. So we appreciate if you fill out that survey. A little bit of housekeeping. You, our audience, are in listen-only mode, so that means we cannot hear you or see you. If you happen to be in your PJs or your underwear, that is perfectly fine with us. That said, though, if you do want to say anything to us, you can just look over on probably your left-hand side. There is a Q&A panel, and that is going to be where you want to reach out to us if you're having any technical difficulties. We have someone backstage to help you out with those things, so they'll help you out privately. And her name's Juliana, so if you've got any audio issues or visual issues, then let us know. We do have a video later on in the presentation. Sometimes that can be pretty choppy. The audio is not perfect, whatever the case, depending on your bandwidth or your setup. So we'll share that YouTube video in the chat as well. You'll also get a copy of today in a recording with that video. So if you're not seeing it perfectly on your end, don't panic. It's a short 50-second video, and we will make sure that you get a copy of the YouTube link so you can watch it whenever you like. I think that's pretty much it for housekeeping. We are going to save questions until the end of the presentation today, just so that we can get through everything. However, if one pops up as we're getting through things, feel free to go ahead and ask your question in that Q&A panel. We'll just reserve it for the end, but don't hesitate to type it in at any time. So if you've joined us in the past, you kind of know a little bit about Wessuc. But in case you don't, we've been around for about 20 years now. Our focus is on beneficial reuse programs, essentially in biosolids. We're most known for our environmental efforts, our clean-out services, our residual services, including land application, and of course our vac services, which is the topic of today. I do realize today's topic is a little bit of a broad topic. We wanted to give you an overview of vac services in general. However, in future webinars, we will be talking a little bit more specifically in different types of cleanouts, aeration tanks, wet wells, that sort of thing. So stay tuned, keep an eye on your inbox. We'll be sure to invite you to those. With every webinar, we like to start off with a little bit of an icebreaker poll question. Now, it's not a serious question and you're not obligated to answer it by any means. The idea is you have a little bit of fun with us and you have the opportunity to kind of learn your way around the program. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll, and on your screen, you should see that question pop up. And that question is, in your opinion, what is the top of the line pickup truck? Now, in my opinion, there is definitely a right answer to this question, but I will be interesting to see what everyone else says. So I'll give you a little bit more time with that. For information, I guess my favorite would be the Fords. I am just grown up with Fords, and they're not only good looking, but also useful. But my 5-year-old son would disagree and say that the Toyota Tacoma is the top of the line truck. So we'll see what you guys think. Okay, I'm going to publish those results and I will share them. So it looks like you guys agree with my 5-year-old son. The Toyota Tacoma, well, Toyota truck, I should say, because there's a few different ones, but Toyota is the top of the line. Well, can't stand surprised. So that's great. Thank you very much for participating in that as our little icebreaker there. Moving on to our speakers. So today we are switching things up a little bit. We often have our sales team join us, but we wanted to have operations come in for this one so that they can answer your questions. I'm sure there will be some technical questions come in today, and we really wanted to have Sean and Austin join us. So Sean Whalen is our Eastern Ontario Operations Project Manager, and Austin Van Veen is our Western Ontario Operations Project Manager. So thanks, guys, for kind of switching your location a little bit today, and instead of being out in the field, you're behind your computer screens with us. So we appreciate that. Before I pass things on to our speakers, actually, I think I've gone through housekeeping a little bit. So again, just letting audience know you are on listen only mode, so we cannot hear or see you. If you need anything, just pop those questions or comments in the Q&A. And then again, following today's webinar, you're going to get that recording, and yeah, we'll share a video YouTube link later on in the presentation. Another note I'll mention is if you are a social guru and you do want to share our webinar today, then we like to use the hashtag #WhyWessucWebinar. Juliana will pop that in our chat at some point today as well, so that you can just copy and paste. But feel free to do us the favor and share. Always happy to have that. Our agenda today is pretty simple. Looks like there's a lot to cover, but we're going to get through here in about a half hour because we don't want to take up too much of your time. First, we'll start with safety and confined space entry. Actually, Westick employees are often trained on entry as well as rescue. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Why clean out and the types of cleanouts. We'll go into a little bit of our fleet specs, dry versus wet cleaning, clean out process, what a day on the job site, what you can expect sort of when we come to a job site, disposal methods, and possibly some past experiences. So to start off, safety at Westick, we like to use the line, no one gets hurt. It's our primary goal each day at Westick. We place the safety of our team to those around us above all else. One accident is just one too many at Westick. Of course, you can't always be perfect, but we really have pride ourselves on making sure that there are no accidents, and it's a good thing. We're also core certified, so we have a certificate of recognition, and that comes from the IHSA, and that's recognized by the Canadian Federation of Construction and Safety Associations. This is really important to us as well, and we do stay on top of our certification and renew it well in advance. A lot of the companies, municipalities we work with actually require this certificate, so we are happy to have that. Confined space. All of our employees that are in the field are trained on both confined space entry as well as confined space rescue. Dangers of confined spaces are listed there. We've got oxygen deficiency, toxic atmosphere, falling hazards. All of these things are things that we make sure our employees know before they head out into the field. So why clean out your facility? I'm going to pass this on to Austin and Sean to take over the rest of the presentation for you guys because they're the experts here, not me. But again, Julian and I are behind the stage, so if you need anything, just let us know in your Q&A panel. Over to you, Austin.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mel. So why clean out your facility? Efficiency. Efficiency is one of the big things there. So regular cleanouts can assist with increasing a facility's efficiency and lowering the risk of a potential breakdown. So this is accomplished by reducing the buildup of debris, the waste, the garbage, or obstructions within the system to ensure that it maintains its operating capacity and reduces the foreign materials being handled by the pumping systems that could potentially make its way into an operating system and cause a blockage, cause wear and tear on pumps and other processing equipment, or failure altogether. So this also provides the ability for interior inspections of the systems to be performed so that our clients can get eyes on the equipment, any of their pumps and mechanical equipment to verify whether or not they require any maintenance or need to be fixed. The overall energy savings, so ensuring that the facilities, tanks, and operating systems are regularly cleaned and maintained. There's a reduction in the energy use for the various systems as the pumps and tanks are less likely to overheat or require more additional operating time, reducing the chances of replacement requirements for the pumps. And allows, like I mentioned, the opportunity to enter the system and perform an assessment to verify any deficiencies in the equipment. Next slide there, Mel. So there's a variety of different tanks that Wessuc directly gets involved in entering to clean out that we do confined space entry clean out work on. So some of those tanks that you see listed on your screen here in wastewater treatment plants are digesters, aeration tanks, and wet well pump stations. So to go further with that, some of the other systems that we also get involved in, but is definitely not limited to these, is clarifiers, grit vortex chambers or settling tanks, carbon media filters, chlorine contact chambers, incinerators, and irrigation tanks. So that's just a very kind of broad range. Like Mel had mentioned, we're probably going to be going into more detail on separate webinars to actually go into the finer details involved in each of those cleanouts. But for the time being, these are the kinds of confined spaces that we enter to clean. Next. Thank you. So our fleet specs. So most of Wessuc's active vacuum trucks are equipped with both a debris tank and a water tank, which connect directly to an onboard power washer and water pump. So this allows the operators the opportunity to customize and gear the method of the washout to each individual tank. For example, a pump station, we would more likely utilize the pressure washer system because there is a little more technique involved and there is more equipment in a much smaller space. So using the pressure washer system allows us to get into those tight areas and remove the maximum amount of debris from the systems. Whereas if we're getting into a digester or aeration tank, we're more likely to use the water pump on board the truck, as this increases the flow of water and the movement of debris within those tanks. So our truck capacity ranges, they're typically anywhere in the range of 8,000 liters to 16,000 liters, or for the conversion there, 8 cubic meters to 16 cubic meters. And we usually suit the proper capacity size truck for the project as necessary. So we also have a dual vac system. So this is a dual vac system for various larger scale projects that require bulk removal of biosolids. So the dual vacuum system provides the ability for the vacuum truck to be discharging material from its debris body while at the same time continuing to operate and remove material from the tank to create a continuous flow of material. This also decreases the amount of time, downtime in between decanting that material or discharging it to an alternate location. And then ultimately ends up reducing the amount of time that's required to clean out the system. Next slide there, Mel. So we have two different styles of vacuum trucks. So we have our Dryback system and our wet vac system. So they are two very different systems. Our Dryback system is designed for the removal of dry, finer material that does not contain liquid and may create a dust or a cloud if the wind blows by or if the material gets agitated. Typically, the Dryback system is used to clean a facility with the dry material byproduct, such as incinerator ash, metal shavings, or carbon media. So essentially what the Dryback system does is it allows the airflow from the vacuum created to travel through a baghouse, which provides additional filtration before reaching the vacuum's blower system. So all dust at a certain level can become explosive or flammable, and the blower system acts as an ignition source. So the baghouse removes that particulate matter from the air flowing through the blower system, essentially to eliminate that risk involved. And then as well, it reduces the need and eliminates the need for needing to add water to the material. So our wet vac system, which is a more common system for cleanout purposes, is designed for material that is wetter in consistency, where extra water might be needed to remove the material from the tank. So the types of tanks that we would typically use this type of system in is anything where we're having to wash material out of it and use the pressure washer system on board, or any types of tanks that require sanitization. So that would be anything from chlorine to any specific sanitation requirement. But anything typically involving the liquid would use a wet vac system. Next slide. Thank you. So our cleanout process. So this is the process from start to finish when we originally take the call to completing the project. So a site visit. A site visit's required to get an understanding of the facility and the material that's going to be handled throughout the course of the project and to determine the purpose of the work. So this also allows our team to assess the necessary equipment and labor required to perform the work and identify any additional safety measures that may need to be taken into account to complete the work. So this could be anything from the condition of the tanks, such as the concrete condition, a ladder access condition, mechanical equipment condition, all the way to line of sight restrictions for the confined space team, or additional personal protective equipment requirements such as ventilation, respirators, whether or not a chlorine gas detector would be required, or if a rope and lifeline pulley system would be required. So those are all the types of things that we look for when we go out to a site visits to determine what the scope of the project is. So a sample analysis, this isn't required on all the projects. A sample of the material might be collected depending on the disposal method determined for the project. So a sample is typically collected and taken to a laboratory or a hazardous waste facility for testing to ensure that the disposal of the material meets the regulation requirements and we can maximize the savings in relation to the cost of disposing of the material. So those samples, like I mentioned, aren't always required, but when off-site disposal is required, we typically take that sample so we can ensure that we're saving you as much money in the disposal of that material. So the approach, myself and Sean, who's also here with me today, we utilize this information that is collected during the sampling and site visits to determine the most efficient approach to cleaning the system in question. This information's also provided to our cleanout teams who go out to the site prior to the project occurring, so that they are aware and we can ensure that the project scope is understood and everyone is on the same page. The clean out portion, so crews will clean out the facility in a safe and efficient manner. Like Mel mentioned, our goal is that no one gets hurt. Typically, this could be anything from so site-specific personal protective equipment to site-specific training. So typically what we'll look for as well when we're visiting sites is whether or not we require any additional training. So as part of that, we will take a look into if there's any additional licensing required. For example, a lift operator license, working next to railways, working at heights, or confined space entry certificates. Which Mel did mention, we do certify all of our staff with the confined space and working at heights. But part of what the crews go out there and do is they use this information as well as the training that we provide to them in order to clean out the facilities. And then finally, the disposal. So after the clean out's complete, Wessuc handles the disposal. Depending on the disposal method that's chosen, we will ensure that the material is disposed of and complies with all regulations that are required. Next, thank you.
Day on the job. So on day one, being on site, there are some key things that you will notice throughout the course of the project. Every day starts the same. When our teams arrive on site, the team will meet with contacts to verify the scope of the project and identify any key factors to the success of the project. Following the review of the project, the team will take the necessary time to complete an on-site safety inspection. This involves a review of the tank's condition, access limitations, a confined space assessment, identifying existing and potential hazards, process limitations, and completing lockout tagouts on necessary equipment, and performing an atmospheric test of the confined space. This is completed on a daily basis as well to ensure that hazards within the confined space or on the site have not changed from previous days. Following the completion of the on-site safety assessment, the team begins the setup of equipment. This varies based on the project and size of the project, but typically involves setup and testing of the confined space rescue equipment, positioning of the vacuum trucks, laying out hoses, and connecting to water sources where needed. From here, the team will make entry into the confined space to begin the cleanout of the necessary system. The confined space cleanout specialist is trained alongside our teams to maximize the removal of debris and foreign materials by directing the material towards the vacuum hoses. When the cleanout has been completed, our team will reach out to the client to verify the condition of the system prior to removing equipment from the space. This can differ on different sites. Sometimes a client will need to go in to do an inspection on the tank afterwards, or they may just say, okay, no, that's good enough, and they'll put the tank right back in service. Next slide.
All right, think before you flush. So a large part of specifically pump station cleanings is a large part of the regular cleanings that happen and occur on pump stations is due to the buildup, even actually in the wastewater treatment plants, is due to the buildup and collection of foreign materials in the system. So there's items such as feminine products, cooking grease, hair and plastics, flushable or disposable wipes, and sand. Those of you who aren't aware, those flushable disposable wipes are not quite flushable and disposable like that. That is not the best way for them to go because they do tend to collect inside of the pump stations and further on systems as well. So all of these things over time begin to collect within the wastewater systems due to their inability and increased time it takes for them to actually decompose or break down. So collections of these items begin to create what we call a rag bed within the system, which is essentially a floating bed of grease, hair, and any other debris that kind of gets caught up in there. So this can cause failures in equipment if this material makes its way into a pump or a processing line, because it can cause a blockage. It can cause pumps to fail. And it's very important to think before you flush those items down the toilet and ensure that everything that is going down your drain is meant to go down the drain. And making sure that any alternative disposal means are being used prior to that being the final result. Okay. So the material disposal. There's a few different options that we have. We work with a variety of different facilities all over Ontario so that we can dispose of the material that we deal with on a daily basis. So Wessuc works to ensure that we maximize the reuse of materials in the most environmentally friendly way possible. So beneficial reuse specifically is the land application of those biosolids to fields to increase the crop yields from farmers. So this method's not always an option, as prior to land applying, any material that Wessuc takes various samples of needs to be sent to a laboratory and be approved under the NASM testing requirements. So for those of you who aren't aware, NASM stands for, or NASM stands for non-agriculturally sourced material. And this is to ensure that the material meets the requirements with various different things that could be contained in the material, such as the chemical levels, regulated metals, nitrate, nitrite, phosphorus, and all those types of things, essentially to just make sure that the material being land applied is actually beneficial and won't cause further harm to the environment. Incinerators, as Wessuc's goal is to maximize the beneficial reuse of material, incinerating waste is always the last option that is considered. Wessuc works with a variety of different sites that have the ability to incinerate the waste, but it is, like I mentioned, the last option available, as there are other means of reusing material and disposing of it in a healthier way. Excuse me. Landfills. So similarly to beneficial reuse, prior to Wessuc bringing any material to a landfill for disposal, we take a sample of those materials to be disposed, and they get verified for a Regulation 558 T-clip and slump test. So this test verifies the inorganics in the material, the metals and the PCBs, to ensure that it will not adversely affect the environment in which it's disposed, and to ensure that the landfill can legally accept the material. And then the last option there, the hazardous waste. So hazardous wastes is an option for disposal of materials that contain a hazardous waste. So materials taken to a hazardous waste facility are materials that did not meet the requirements of the NASM testing for beneficial reuse or the T-clip and slump to be able to go to a landfill. So this means that the material in question contains some form of hazardous material that would adversely affect the environment around where it is disposed. So this could include material containing oils, fuel, paint, lead, silica, or asbestos, just to name a few. There is a much larger list available, but those are just to name kind of a few of the key ones. So hazardous waste recycling facilities are registered to accept that material and process it, and their staff are trained to handle that waste. So those are the four key disposal options that we typically take into account when we're looking at projects. Next slide. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sean and Austin. Oh, I think we got an echo. Mute yourself there, Austin, if you don't mind. Thanks. Yeah, so thank you guys for kind of explaining overview of VAC services in 30 minutes or less. As I mentioned before, we do have a video to show. Again, depending on your bandwidth and your setup, you may get a little bit of choppiness. Maybe you'll see it, but the audio won't work, or other way around. Juliana will go ahead and share the YouTube link to this video in the chat. So if you want to view it on your own because you're not seeing it perfectly with us, by all means do that. You might as well just check out the Wessuc YouTube page while you're there. We've got a few videos up of different jobs and cleanouts that we do. So that might be an option for you. So I'm going to mute myself and turn my camera off, and I'll play that video and join you guys back in about 50 seconds.
Hey everyone, it's Juliana from the marketing team here at Westing, and today we are on wastewater treatment and using unique methods, which includes the bake, pour, and shaker machine to take all of the material out.
The tank, so basically we're using a back truck, suck it out of the tank, and there put it into the bake pour material. That takes out a lot of the hair and the plastics, and put the bake pour, goes into the shaker, all the liquid that drains out of these screens, and the shaker separates the liquid fans. Sand goes into the bin.
Okay, so hopefully you were able to view that, but again, if not, the YouTube link is in our chat, so feel free to watch that now or on your own time. We are running a little bit behind schedule, but that's okay. If you're still with us, thank you for sticking around. We do have some time for questions. So as promised, if you have any questions you want to ask Sean and Austin, feel free to do so. Just remember to type those in the Q&A portion on your program there. Just type that in and send it to us, and we'll read those out loud, and Austin and Sean can answer them. We do have a few that came through while we were presenting. So I will just kind of open that section up here. So one question is, what does Westick do in order to mitigate spills or leaks? Maybe one of you guys, whichever one wants to take that one. Austin, maybe?
Sorry about that, technical difficulties. To mitigate spills, a lot of times on sites, if we're running auxiliary equipment like hydraulic power packs or anything that has a potential for leaks, we'll put some sort of spill containment unit under them. We also ensure that all of our hoses are tight and their connections are good to ensure that we don't have any accidental releases. Equipment and trucks are inspected daily to make sure valves are working properly and that we won't have any issues on site.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a good answer. Thank you. Hopefully that answers the question. Another question that's come through are, what are some common hurdles you have to endure with on a job site? For example, construction zones or tight spacing. Are there any restrictions that would actually stop or slow down a job site on the job site? Sorry.
Yeah, so the biggest obstacle on a lot of our job sites is the space required. A lot of times you're getting big equipment into a very small space. And when you're working alongside other contractors in a very tight area, that can be problematic at times. So you do your best to kind of work around everybody. You know, a lot of the smaller plants we go into will have chemical deliveries or stuff you have to work around. So I think one of the biggest hurdles is kind of like lay down area and space.
Awesome. Thank you. So we have one more question that's come through, and I think we've got time to answer that. How many crew members can usually be expected on a job site?
So that can vary based on the size and scope of the project. I would, for a typical like pumping station clean out, you're probably looking at a 3-man crew minimum for confined space. And a lot of, if you go into the larger plants where you're cleaning out a large aeration tank, you could be 5-6 members on a team depending, but every job is different, but that would be the average range.
Perfect. Fair enough. Looks like that's all the time we have for questions. I do possibly see some people doing some typing there. So if we didn't get to your question or you've got one that comes up after today's webinar, feel free to reach out to us. I'll put Sean and Austin's contact information up on the page there. Lauren and Brett are our sales managers as well for cleanout. So if you have a question for them instead, you can feel free to reach out to them. Their information is also up on your site. Again, thank you so much for joining us. This will all be shared in a recording following today. And if you're reviewing the recording or the video and a question comes up, we're happy to answer them. I think that's about it. So Sean and Austin, thank you so much for joining us. I know that you guys are usually really busy, especially this time of year, and you're also usually out in the field and not so much behind your computer screens. So we're changing the pace for you, but appreciate you joining us today and presenting some technical things with us. And then also, as mentioned, we will look into diving a little deeper into specific cleanouts in the future webinars. So maybe Sean and Austin will join us for those webinars in the future. As I previously mentioned, there is a survey that will pop up. So when you leave us today, if you have an extra 2 minutes, it's not a very extensive survey, but we do take the feedback seriously. So if you've got that extra couple minutes available, then please, we appreciate if you take the survey and let us know what you thought of today. And yeah, if you're looking forward to other webinars, please keep an eye on your inbox. They'll be coming through to your email, just like this one did, or check out our social pages, and we always make sure to post the dates there as well. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us today, and we'll let everyone get back to work.